Sorry about that. I had the mute on there. Thanks, Dan, for letting me know there. I accidentally had the mute on the microphone. So, yeah, if you got your questions, go ahead and post them in there. Like I said, it doesn't look like we have any questions in there as of yet. So, get your questions in there and we will, excuse me, get answered them. All right, so while you guys are coming up with questions, I'll go over a question that I get all the time, and that is how to get the hips opening at impact. So, what we need to do from a physical standpoint with the legs to get the hips to open is in the start of the downswing, right? We need to be kind of flexing our hips and our knees down, right? So when we look at better players, typically what we're seeing is in the start of the downswing, from the start of the downswing to lead arm parallel, we're seeing the legs are reaching their maximum flex, and also our hips are reaching pretty close to our maximum flex. So basically, I'm making the angle between my legs and my spine. I'm making that angle smaller as I'm coming down. Typically, when I see people not opening their hips, what's happening is they're straightening out their legs and their hips right away. So basically, they'll be at the top of the swing, and then in the start of the downswing, the legs will straighten out and my hips will move forward, and that will make the hips stall, and you won't be able to open them up. So we need to be kind of pushing those hips down and pushing those hips back by flexing the knees and flexing into the hips. All right. Once we do that, then we want to be kind of pushing into the ground to rotate our body. We want to be pushing down and out away from you with your lead leg. So if you imagine, if I'm standing on top of a clock here, if this is noon on the clock, I got 9 o'clock over here, I'm going to be pushing down and out away from me toward 10:30 on that clock. And that's going to straighten out my lead leg and push the hip back and around. So the act of opening the hips is actually very simple, right? We're squatting down. You may have heard the Sneed squat, right? We're pushing the hips back, the chest down, the knees are flexing, and then we're kind of twisting into the ground. We're pushing into the ground to rotate the body. This really isn't the issue for most people. Most people aren't, most people, when they're not opening up their hips, it's not because they don't understand how to do that. Now, some people it might be, but for most people, overwhelming majority of students that I see that struggle opening the hips, they don't open up the hips because if they did, the results of their golf shots would be very poor, right? So let me explain. If I was coming down in a position and I had this club, let's say I had this club steep, and what that means is this club, it's kind of more straight up and down vertical in my start of my downswing. So if I were to do those things that I just talked about, where I flexed my knees, right? I pushed my knees out over my toes, I flexed my knees, I flexed my hips, my chest came down, and I had that club steep, and then I rotated my body. Look at what this club's doing. This club is going to come way over the top. And I tell you what, there are no good golfers that do that. There's not a single good golfer that comes down steep and over the top. That's typically what a high handicap golfer does. And the reason for that is that when you do that, one, it's hard to make good contact with the ball. And if you do make good contact with the ball, it's going to end up being a big pull, a pull hook, a big slice. You're just going to be cutting across the ball. It's just going to be hard to hit the ball straight or to have any kind of consistency at all. So what most people do when they get into this position, right? The club is steep, right? What they'll do is they'll do what I talked about a second ago, is where the legs straighten out and the hips kind of move toward the target. Because when that happens, look what happens to my shaft, right? The shaft of my club here is now shallowed out. I can now swing this club on plane and from the inside, and I can hit a functional shot. I can hit the ball straight from doing that. Now, the problem with that's not optimal. It's way better than coming down than rotating getting the hips open and coming down steep and over the top. But it's still it's not ideal, and the reason for that is that when we're not able to get the hips to open up and get the club to work down on plane, we have to move our chest away from the ball and release the club early, and it's going to be hard to get shaft lean and compression on the ball. I'm not really going to be able to compress that ball and be able to get some good distance out of it. And also, it makes my face very unstable, meaning typically that club face is very open, and I've got to really flip it shut, and my club face is going from open to close very quickly. You can imagine how hard that is at timing. Your golf swing just becomes very dependent on timing. It's very hard to be consistent when you do that. So really, one of the biggest keys to getting the hips to open up is to have the club coming down shallow in the start of the downswing. If I can get this club in this kind of position, well, now when I'm squatted down like this, I can keep rotating, and look what happens. That club just comes down right where it needs to be, right? I'm getting my body opened up here, but this club is now in a position to where I can have the club coming down on plane. I can get shaft lean at impact. So really, for most people, who are really trying to open up the hips, it's not because they can't do it. It's because if they did do it, they would play horrendous golf, right? And you're already playing okay golf. So if we want to play even better golf, we have to get the club into a position to allow you to incentivize you to open up your body. Because right now, you have no incentive to do that. In fact, you have the opposite. You're going to be punished if you open up the hips. It's going to make you worse, right? So opening up the hips is a product of getting that club shallowed. Now, if you start getting this club really, really shallowed out, and then you're still kind of doing those same hip motions that I talked about, where the legs are straightening out, the hips are moving forward, and then the club is getting too shallow, then that's what we need to focus on what I talked about earlier, where, okay, now we're getting this club shut out. Now we really need to focus on getting those flex in those legs, getting the hips to push back and the chest to move down, because that's now you're incentivized to do that. But most golfers just aren't doing that. So I venture to say most of you need to get the club shallowing out in order to be incentivized to get the hips to open up and do that first part. So the good part about that is that we have an awesome course that's included with your membership that walks you through exactly how to do that. And it's our new 20-minute shallowing fix course. It's 3 drills that you work through, and you can do these all in one range session when you go to the range. Some of you, it may take a little bit more, but some of you, it may just be one range session. You can go out there and you can get that club shallowing out, and then finally be incentivized to get the body opening up and get that shaft lean that you've been wanting. So if you want to check out this course, click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute shallowing fix course and get started on those drills. All right, so let's see if we got some new questions in there. All right, so we got a couple in there. So Gary B says, having some issues keeping elbow inside during downswing, what drills can help with the feels to stay down and inside? Trying to think of what would be the best. One would be a ball drill that I really like. So with this, what you're doing is you're just taking a ball like this. This is just like a toy ball. I think I got it at Target or something like that. It was a few dollars. But it's just kind of a squishy toy ball. What you do is just put this between your elbows, right? And now you can take the club and just make some swings, right, where you're keeping that ball between your elbows. The moment my elbows kind of move apart from each other and I take my club, I take my arm out away from my body, I'm going to drop that ball. So if we have the feeling of keeping that ball between our elbows, it makes it a lot easier to make those swings. So that would be a good drill that I like to help you with that. So Chen says, how important is side bend when hitting an iron? Yeah, very important. I mean, if we don't, in order, what I was talking about before, we have to have some element of side bend when we're getting the body to open up. And if we want to get shaft lean, because if we don't, then we're going to tend to come over the top, right? So for those of you who aren't familiar, when we're talking about side bend, we're talking about basically, if you imagine my hips are level, I'm kind of bending into with my spine here to get my right shoulder lower, right? So when I'm coming through contact, if I'm rotating my hips and I don't have the side bend to kind of go with that, then my shoulders are going to get open with my hips, right? And when that happens, I'm going to tend to swing over the top. So I have to have some side bend here to be able to get this club to more easily work from the inside. So now my shoulders can be closer to square. My shoulders are still going to be a little bit open typically, but my shoulders can be closer to square with my hips open, and that's going to allow me to swing more on plane. So all the best ball strikers out there have side bend, not only with their irons, but with all their clubs, or with all their full swing shots. You're going to see that. If you don't have that, right? If I don't have the side bend, if I open up my body, then this is going to happen. So I have to have the side bend to keep my shoulders from opening up too much. So Rod S says, to determine if you are shallow, are you looking at the line between the ball and the shoulders or something else? What I like to look at is something called the elbow plane line. So the elbow plane line is a line that goes from the hosel of the club up through the elbow at address. This is only really accurate if we have the correct camera angle. So we want to make sure that the camera angle is set up right down the toe line. If the camera angle is set up down the target line, it's going to skew the view a little bit. They say, video doesn't lie or a picture doesn't lie. Well, it actually can lie because you're a video or a picture, that's something that's 2D, but you're looking at something that's 3D. So perspective is really, really important when that is the case. So you want to make sure that you have the correct perspective, so that way you're seeing things correctly. So you want to be set up down the toe line. You want to be set up at about hip level here. And you want to be far away enough to where you and the club don't leave the frame. So this camera angle here is actually too high and it's too close, right? As I go up to the top of the swing, you can see my club goes out of the frame. So we want to see the club and you in the frame throughout the entire swing. So the first time you set up your camera, it's kind of a pain in the butt. You gotta figure it out. But after that, it's very, very easy. It's like riding a bike, right? The first time you learn to ride a bike, very difficult. You might skin your knee, right? And then you learn how to ride your bike and you don't even have to think about it. You just do it, right? So it's the same thing with any skill. You gotta learn how to film yourself on video. So that's what I'd recommend doing. And then just set yourself up the same way every time, right? So if you find, okay, I need to be 4 steps from the ball behind me, and then I'm going to set up the camera right down my toe line, right? So the easiest way to do that would be just to take a club or an alignment stick, place it on the ground, and then line up the camera directly with that. Use a tripod or something like that. I do not recommend having a buddy or a friend hold the camera because they're not going to do it the way that you want it to be done. And no matter how steady of a hit, they can have the steady hands of a surgeon, and it's still going to be moving around everywhere. So use a tripod, use something to make the camera stationary. I recommend tripods because they're the most stable thing. There's other things out there that like you put a stick in the ground. Honestly, I don't like those because you get on a windy day, those things are moving around all over the place. You get a cheap tripod, $10, $15, and it works just fine. Get a phone mount for it. You attach your phone to it, you're good to go. That's exactly what you need. So you can control the height, you can control the direction, you can control how close or how far it is. That's exactly what you want. You just set it up the same way every single time. So once you get the camera angle correct, then you draw a line from the hosel of the club up through your elbow, and we want to see that club kind of tracking just below that line as soon as possible and all the way down to the golf ball, right? So eventually it's going to get to where you're on the line. But if you see that club tracking above that line, that means you're steep, right? And that means you need to work on getting that club track more underneath that line. So working through the drills and the 20-minute shallowing fix will help you to do that. But that's how you check and see if you're steep. Your ball flight will also be an indication, right? So if you're hitting pulls, if you're hitting slices, if you're hitting, pull hooks, things like that, odds are you are not shallowing out the club. Um, a nice baby draw is going to be an indication that you're shallowing out the club, because unless you hit the ball on the toe, you can't really hit a solid baby draw is definitely going to be an indication that you're shallowing out the club. Now, you may not be able to do it in the ideal way. So remember, I talked about that elbow plane line. You can be above that elbow plane line early, stand up out of it, get it below the elbow plane line late. It's not ideal. You are technically shallowing out the club. It's just happening really late. That's not ideal. I mean, it's definitely better than just coming down steep all the way down. It's not ideal because then things get dependent on timing quite a bit. So ideally, what we'd like to see is we'd like to see that club head getting just underneath that elbow plane very early, like right away, basically, and then tracking right underneath it all the way down. That would be ideal. That's where you're going to get your most consistent golf when you get in that situation. So, but if you're steep early, then shallow late, not ideal, but can definitely be functional. If you're steep all the way down, you're definitely going to have a hard time being consistent when you do that. Oops. Forgot how full I filled that up. Sorry about that. All right, so let's keep going. John S. says, what's a good drill for training the trail arm? I'm excellent at throwing left-hand frisbees, but my brother used to tell me that I need to use my right hand. He was a good player who passed a couple years back. So it just depends on what you're trying to train your trail arm to do. I went over earlier, if your trail arm is working out away from you like this, right? So if you're coming down and then your trail arm works out away from you, that ball between the elbows drill, I really like that. So you take the ball between the elbows. This is just a toy ball I got at Target, a couple $. A youth soccer ball, a volleyball would probably work. There are training aids out there that are basically this. I think it's called the Smart Ball. Tour Striker makes it. I like the Smart Ball. It's but I think it's like $50, and this is like $3. So does the same thing. So the only difference is that this doesn't have a lanyard on it. So when you drop it, it's going to drop to the ground. The Smart Ball, it's going to hang around your neck. So, but anyway, take this, put it between your elbows, and that can help train the elbow to stay more under your lead arm. Another one, if you're trying to train your trail arm from throwing too early, one that I really like is the stick drill. So take an alignment stick, put it on the club, put about half of it going down the stick, half of it going down the shaft. So it'd be about 2 feet going down each end. These alignment sticks are about 4 feet long. I like to have it on the bottom, right? And what this does is it's just going to give you feedback on whether you're throwing your arm too early, right? So if I come in and I straighten out my trail arm and my wrist, this stick is going to come in and it's going to whack me in the side. Whereas if I come in and I keep my trail wrist bent back and my trail arm more bent coming into contact, right, then this stick is going to keep from touching me. So basically you just start out with some shorter, slower swings at first, then build up to faster and faster swings. So like I said, it just depends on what you're trying to train your trail arm to do. If you're trying to train your trail arm to stay more inside, I like the ball drill. If you're trying to train your trail arm to keep from throwing, I like the stick drill. With the stick drill, there's also a training aid. Again, alignment stick, $2. This, I don't know how much this is, $40-50. I think this is called a tour rotation stick. It basically does the same thing. You attach it to the end of your club, right? And it does the same thing, but you don't have to hold a stick next to your club. You can just take your normal grip. If you don't need to spend extra money on this, but if you want something like that, it makes it very, very easy with it. I warm up with this almost every single time I play. I really like the tour rotation stick. I like that you can attach it to the club and not have to worry about it. If you have the downside to this training aid is that if you have like jumbo grips, like this is a mid-size grip on this club, and that's about as big a grip as it can handle. So if you have large or like jumbo grips, it probably won't fit. You probably have to do the stick drill. But normal grips to mid-size grip, this works well. The website for this is trsgolf.co or .co.uk. You can also get them on Amazon. It's called Tour Rotation Stick. If you want to check it out, I really like that. To train the trail wrist, there's another training aid out there called the Precision Impact. It looks like a cast, and I don't have one in here, but basically when you bend it back, it locks your wrist into place, and it teaches you how to swing with having your arm, basically having your wrist bent back, right? So I really like that training aid as well. If you search the website in the upper right-hand corner, there's a search engine for Precision Impact. Just search the two words, Precision Impact, and you'll find the video that I'm talking about. If you're on a mobile device, you can click the upper right-hand corner. There's an icon there that will expand a menu. Scroll down to the bottom of that menu, you'll find the search box there. You can search Precision Impact there as well. So like I said, it just depends on what exactly you're trying to train, but there's all kinds of drills and things like you can do. All right, so let's keep going. So Keith L says, I can't stop pulls and hooking my fairway woods no matter how weak I make my grip. I hit better when I steepen my swing. I'm not coming over the top. I cannot make myself fade the ball, even try to keep the face open. And then goes on to say, I think my hands are too far in front of my body at impact. So basically, if you're hitting pulls, you are coming over the top. Like your ball flight is telling you that. The only way you would not be hitting a pull is if you're hitting it way out of the heel, because that can make you pull it a little bit. So that might be something that you might want to look at. The reason for that is that when you hit the ball on the heel, the face will twist closed, and the ball will start more to the left for a right-handed golfer than it normally would. Doesn't mean it's going to start to the left, just means it will start more to the left. So that could be what's causing you to pull the ball a little bit, is you're hitting the ball off of the heel, and that's closing the face and making the ball start to the left. And that could be what's going on. So use some foot power spray it on the club face, see if you're striking on the heel. And if you are, just change your intention to hitting it off the toe. Just try to hit the ball off the toe. That will likely move the strike more in the center of the face. If it doesn't, then you exaggerate it even more. You may even need to exaggerate missing the golf ball completely, like hitting a toe shank. That may be what you need to feel like to get the ball on the toe. Now, I think a lot of people are hesitant to this because they're like, well, I'm not gonna try to hit the ball off the toe my whole life. That's not what you're going to need to do. Eventually, you're going to adapt, and you're actually going to start hitting the ball off the toe. And at that time, you can start trying to hit the ball off the center of the face. You essentially recalibrated yourself. So if it's heel strikes, use the foot power spray, check to make sure, and then try to hit the ball off the toe and see if that gets you to stop pulling it. But if the strikes are solid, if you're hitting it solid in the middle of the face and you're pulling it, then you're coming over the top. That's just the path of the club. I mean, from a physics standpoint, there's no way you're not, basically, right? This club is working to the left through impact, right? So you need to swing the club more to the right, more into out to get rid of that. So what I'd recommend doing is working through drill number 2 of the 20-minute shallowing fix. It sounds like you don't have any issue with getting the club face closed, right? You're hitting pulls and pull hooks. So that's basically what step number 1 of what drill number 1 of the 20-minute shallowing fix is. You may need to go, if you're hitting it solid, then you need to go to drill number 2 to get the club working from the inside. So that's what I would recommend doing, is going to drill number 2. To get to that, click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute shallowing fix, then go to drill number 2 in the 20-minute shallowing fix and work through that drill to get rid of your pulls and pull hooks. Because that drill number 2 is going to get you to starting the ball to the right, get you to shallow out the club. All right, so let's keep going. So DJR says, I've been working very hard on doing drills and finally shallowing the club and hitting the best shots of my life. However, hosel rocketed a couple shots. I never hosel any shots ever. Is it common this is happening because I actually am finally shallowing out the club? Yes, this can happen when you start to shallow out the club. If you're someone who was coming down steep before, well, what was happening is this club is working closer to you through impact, right? Because I'm swinging out to in. So the sweet spot of the club is getting closer to me as I come through contact. So you adapted to that to get the ball more in the center of the face. Well, now when you shallow out the club, the sweet spot works a little bit away from you, right? Well, that can bring the hosel more into play. So as I mentioned earlier, with someone who was hitting the ball off the heel, you just need to kind of recalibrate yourself and try to hit the ball off the toe. Just try to hit the ball off the, because even the shots that you're not shanking are probably off the heel. They're probably more off of this part of the face. Because what happens is that if you're shanking multiple shots, now if you hit one shank and that's it. I mean, tour players hit shanks. Will Zalatoris, I think, hit a shank on a way to a runner-up finish at the U.S. Open. I think John, or maybe it was John Rahm. John Rahm might have hit a shank. I can't remember. But anyway, one of the guys that got, that was in the tournament and doing really well, he hit a shank on Saturday. I can't remember who it was, but somebody did. And that's probably just like a one in however many shots that they hit that they hit a shank. If that's the case, you're probably not hitting in the heel every time. But if you're getting a few shanks in there, most likely what's happening is you're hitting most of your shots in the heel, and then some of them are getting it on the hosel. So what you need to do is change your intention to hitting the ball off the toe, right? And then that will likely move your strikes more in the center of the face. And then you just keep doing that until you actually start hitting the ball off the toe. So use some foot power spray to give you some feedback when you're practicing. Spray it on the club face. You'll be able to clearly see where you're striking on the club face. If you look at the driver face here, I put some foot power spray on there. You can clearly see the center face strike there. So use some foot power spray. Really, really good tool. One of my favorites. One of my favorite tools for seeing the strikes on the face for sure. So check that out. But yeah, just try to hit the ball off the toe to get those strikes more in the center of the face. The other thing that could be going on, you may want to look at your swing for this, is that what a lot of people do to shallow out the club is they stand up out of their posture. So basically they get here, they're steep, and then they stand up, and look what happens. That shallows out the club, but that kind of moves my hips out toward the ball. So I'd make sure that you're not shallowing out the club doing that, and you're shallowing out the club by virtue of your arms and getting your elbows in the right position, right? Because remember, the chopping sequence that we go through in the 20-minute shallowing fix, right? We want to get the elbows moving in the direction of the target. If we go like this, right, that's going to move the hips out toward the ball, and that can make you start to hit it off the hosel. So that'd be another thing I'd look at. So make sure that you're creating space with your hips, pushing those hips back, creating space, and you're shallowing out the club with your arms instead of dropping that right shoulder. So Dan says, I would be curious as to Keith's ball position. Yeah, so even if your ball position is really forward, the club's still moving to the left, right? So you still need to get the ball position working out to the right. So if you have the ball position more forward, it just means you have to shallow it out more to get the contact to be good, right? So, or to get the club shallow, or to get the path to be working into out. DJR says it only happened twice. Yeah, I mean, you're still probably hitting most of them out of the heel, but a quick test would tell you for sure. So Rick C says, having trouble transferring my weight to front foot on follow through, always have slight fallback. Typically it's because I know this is kind of a reoccurring theme, but it's probably because you're coming down steep. Typically when people come over the top and steep, they'll fall back on their back foot and they won't get all the way to their lead side. The reason for that is that when you come down steep and over the top, it moves the low point of your swing more toward the target. So when I say low point, I'm talking about where this club comes down, reaches a low point, and then works back up. If you imagine this, if I'm standing at home plate here and I swing this club in the direction of third base, my club's going to bottom out more in front of my lead foot, right? If I swing this club, if I shallow it out a ton, too much, in fact, if I shallow the club out too much, you can always do too much of a good thing. And I swing this club way down out to the right, out toward first base. Well, then my club's going to bottom out more toward my back foot, right? So if I'm swinging way over the top and I transfer my weight forward, then my club's going to bottom out way too far forward and I won't be able to hit the ball. So if I swing over the top and then I hang back on my back foot, well, now I can get the club to bottom out where the ball is and I can make good ground contact. So I would venture to say you probably need to swing the club from the inside. So that way you're incentivized to shift your weight to your lead side and get in a good position. So just look at yourself on video, see if you're coming down steep. More than likely you are, and you just need to get that club working from the inside so that way you can hit a good shot. But if you want some good drills to help you to shift your weight to your lead side, let's say you are coming down shallow and you're not getting to your lead side and you're chunking everything, I'd highly recommend checking out our Stop Chunking and Topping course. Lots of great drills in there to help you to get to your lead side a lot better. So if you want to check that out, click the house icon at the top of the page. That will take you to the home page. And if you scroll down the home page, you'll see a list of all the courses there. And you can select the Stop Chunking and Topping courses, the course that's included with your membership. So Dan S says, use foot power spray a lot on my driver, but it seems to be building up. What works good to clean it off? Water, like a wet rag. That's all you need. Just a little wet rag will wipe it right off. Generally, I'll spray it on there. I'll hit a few shots, and then I'll wipe it off, reapply it, and then go from there. So DJR says, as I am shallowing the club, I start turning my left shoulder and hip at the very same time, or should I shallow the club first and then turn the left shoulder and left hip? Well, typically the shallowing of the club is happening in the start of the downswing, and you're turning your hips and the shoulders in the start of the downswing as well. So basically, I'm here and I'm starting. Here's at the top of the swing. My downswing is starting, my club is shallowing, and my hips are turning and my shoulders are turning. So I'm not going to go up to the top here, shallow the club, then start turning, right? I'm going to go up to the top of the swing, and I'm going to be turning and shallowing at the club simultaneously. Right at the start of the downswing. And that's what starts the downswing, is the turning of the body and the shallowing of the club. All right, keep the questions coming. All right, while you guys are coming up with questions, I will talk about a question that I get often. How do you properly square the club face? So first we want to understand what changes the face angle of the club, right? So what changes the direction the club face is pointing at impact? So there's several pieces to this. So one would be shaft lean, right? So if I lean this shaft forward, I'll actually put this angle finder on here to make it a little bit easier for you guys to be able to see this, right? So if I lean this, if I have this shaft straight up and down and the face is square, and I just lean the shaft forward, that actually opens the club face, right? So that's a big reason why people struggle with shaft lean, is because leaning the shaft forward opens the face, right? So that means that we have to do something else to close the face. So leaning the shaft forward opens the face, and leaning the shaft backwards, so an early release, right? So if I'm coming in, I'm flipping the club through impact, that will actually close the face. And that's what a lot of poor golfers do to close the face. So Those are two things that open and close the face. So early release closes the face, later release opens the face. So that's number one. Number two is rotation of this handle, right? So rotation of this handle. So where is that coming from? That's coming a lot from wrist angles, right? So if I bow my lead wrist, right, and extend back my trail wrist, you can see here how that closes my club face. That's going to close the club face. If I cup the lead wrist, right, and I, flatten out my trail wrist, that will open the club face, right? So bowed closes, cupping, opens it up, right? So that would be one piece. And then some forearm roll, right? If I roll my forearms, that will also open and close the club face. But basically, rotation of the shaft via, rotation of my wrists and my arms. Another piece is the lie angle of the club, or the handle height, right? So if I have a very high handle as I come through contact, that's going to open the face. If I have a very low handle, it's going to close the face. We want to have a lie angle that's flush with the ground, with the club, that squares up the face. Now, when we look at tour players, what they're doing is they're getting shaft lean, which opens the face, which means they need to have some combination of wrist angles to be able to close the face, right? So if I have lots of shaft lean, but then I which opens the face, right? So if I'm here and then I lean the shaft forward and I open the face and then I cup my wrist on top of it. I mean, this is a wedge, so there's lots of loft in it. It's basically just making the face is so open, it's just going straight up in the air. But you get the idea. So we have to have, if I come into contact here with lots of shaft lean, I have to strengthen my wrist angles to accommodate that, right? I have to bow my lead wrist. I cannot come into contact with a cupped wrist because that's going to open up the face, right? So tour players have shaft lean. They have wrist angles, stronger wrist angles dependent on the strength of their grip. If you have a stronger grip, meaning my thumbs are more on the side of the grip, I don't have to have as crazy strong wrist angles. I can have my wrist more in a flat position. It kind of looks like it's cupped from this angle, just from the camera angle, but that's just because I have a strong grip. If you look at it from the actual angle of my wrist, you can see that my wrist is pretty flat, right? But if I have a weak grip, meaning my thumbs are more on top of the grip, they're in line with the logo on the grip, I'm going to have a lot of bow in my lead wrist in order to square that up. And there are players that do that. Colin Morikawa, John Rahm, Victor Hovland. These are all great players that bow that lead wrist and have a weak grip. You can do it that way. It's just a very difficult thing for most people to do, right? And if I stay in my posture, I'm going to more easily be able to get that. I'm not going to stand up and open the face. I'm going to more easily get that club into a better position. So to get to where we're squaring up the face properly, the best thing you can do is work through our 20-minute shallowing fix. So in that drill number one, what we're doing is we're learning the things that pros do to square up the face and the easiest thing for you to do, right? So the first thing we got to do is find what our natural grip is. A lot of people don't know what their natural grip is. And what that means is essentially what grip on the club can I put on the club that is most comfortable for me, that feels the most natural for me to have shaft lean in a square face at impact. So there's a sequence that we work through in the 20-minute shallowing fix in that drill number one, right out of the gate, where you learn what your natural grip is, right? For most people, that's going to be a stronger grip for most people. So that's number one. And as I alluded to earlier, if you have a stronger grip, it's a heck of a lot easier to square up that face because you don't have to use crazy strong wrist angles. But hey, if you find that your natural grip is very weak, then you're going to have to get pretty strong wrist angles if you want to square the face in the proper way and be able to compress the ball, to be able to get shaft lean to be consistent. So the best way to square up the face, to learn to square up the face the right way, is to work through the 20-minute shallowing fix, specifically that drill number one from the 20-minute shallowing fix, and find your natural grip, and then learn those proper wrist angles, learn how to do that bowing of the wrist, extending of the trail wrist. We see Dustin Johnson, we see all those players with those crazy wrist angles coming down. You don't have to do it that much, but you need to do kind of your version of that to learn to get that club face square. That's why those guys, Dustin Johnson, John Rahm, they are so consistent and they're so stinking good because they know that club face is going to be square when they come into contact. There's no timing element that they have to time up the face perfectly. That club face is just square all the way through. They know exactly where that ball is going. So if you want to learn to do that, highly recommend checking out the 20-minute shot line fix. Again, this is a course. It's included with your membership. Go to that drill number 1. Once we get that natural grip figured out and we get the wrist angles working in the right way, you're learning the proper way to square up the face. Then we work towards shallowing out the club, and then we work toward finding your stock shot, which is what you do in drill number 3. So check it out. Instruction tab, 20-minute shot line fix. Get started on those drills. All right, let's see if we got any new questions. All right. So Gary B says, thanks for the help. Got to run. No problem, Gary. Have a good rest of your day, buddy. All right. So Michael M says, speak to the body forward move at start of downswing. Yeah. So there's going to be some lateral shift into our lead side. And that's actually starting to happen in the last part of the backswing. So as we start the backswing, most tour players are going to have a slight move off the ball. I mean, very slight, meaning their hips are just kind of moving about an inch off the ball. If you look at most tour players, especially those who have my favorite golf swings typically do, because they're just the most athletic kind of swings. So if you look at Rory McIlroy, one of my favorite golf swings, if you watch him, he'll move off the ball just slightly, right? It'll just be about an inch off the ball, and then he'll start turning his hip back and around. And as he gets into about this area of his backswing, that's as far right as he's going to be, as far to his right. And then as he's getting up to the top of the swing, he's actually starting to move his body to his lead side. So if you're to take a line and draw a line on the outside of his hip here, what you would see in the very, like as the club is starting to go back, you will see his hip just go barely into that line. And then by the time he's here in the swing, he's already back on that line. And then as he's getting up to the top, you'll actually start to see separation between his hip and the line. And that's coming from, one, when you turn the hips, they get narrower for most people, depending on your build, I suppose. But then also, his hips are actually, if you look at the center of his hips are actually moving toward the target slightly. And then when he gets into and he starts the downswing, they're actually continuing to move toward the target, and then they start to move back and around, right? So that's to get pressure into the lead foot, so that way we can push into the ground and move back and around. So if you want to learn or get the proper feeling for how to do this, the best way to do it is with the step drill. So with the step drill, you start with your feet together, and then you throw this club back. As you throw the club back, you're going to be stepping forward, right? So that's teaching you to kind of get your momentum going forward. And then when you get the foot in the ground, you should be at the top of the swing. Then you push and you turn through the ball. That's really a great way to get you the proper feeling of how that downswing lateral shift should work. All right, so let's keep answering some questions here. So Mark P says, I'm really fighting the hooks. I try not to over-rotate the club face. It seems I have to try to hold off every shot or it will hook. Thoughts? So your club face is just too closed. So, those elements that I talked about earlier where they close the face. So remember, here are the things that close the face. 1 is an early release of the club. 2 is a over rotation of the shaft, right? So too much bowed lead wrist. Too much extend back trail wrist, too much rotation of the arms, that closes the club face. And then the other thing would be handle low. I very rarely see someone who's closing the face too much because the handle is low. The only place where that really happens is where the ball is like way above your feet, something like that. We saw, in the U.S. Open this past weekend, we saw players hitting shots where they're like choked up on the metal, right? And the ball, they're like down in the bunker, and the balls they're chopping out of the fescue. Well, if you notice, whenever they do that, the ball comes out way to the left whenever they do that usually, and that's because the face is really close because the ball's way above the feet. But on normal swings, level turf, I don't know that I've ever seen anyone with the handle too low, and that's causing the club face to close. So that means it's coming down to two things. You're either early releasing the club too much, right? And or you're bowing the lead wrist too much to get the club face closed, right? And of those two things, the more likely one is the early release. So I would really try to work on getting those hands more in front to push that face open. One other thing would be the strength of your grip. You may have too strong of a grip to accommodate how the club is coming through. So weakening the grip slightly may help with that as well. So those would be the things I'd be looking at. As far as a release drill, as I talked about earlier, the stick drill is my favorite for working on getting the club to release more out in front, getting the hands more in front. Just take an alignment stick, a couple dollars. Any home improvement store is going to have them. The bigger ones like Lowe's, Menards, Home Depot, like that. Half of it goes down the shaft, half of it goes out the butt end of the club, and just make some swings where you're keeping that stick from touching it. Start with shorter, slower swings, like little chip shots, then go to pitches, then go to like half swing shots, then 3/4 swing shots, and you just keep chipping away at it, getting better and better and better at it. But that can help you with the release of the club. But you're going to need to feel like that face is very open through contact. Really try to get that ball to start to the right. You could also be coming down a little bit steep. It'd be hard to say because if you come down a little bit steep with a closed face, that ball is going to go way left. It's going to hook. It's going to start left and hook left. So that could be part of it too. So working through drill number 2 and 3 of the 20-minute shallowing fix, that could be a good thing for you to do as well. So those would be some things to look at to see what's going on. For me to know for sure what you need to do, I would need to see your swing. I do offer online lessons. If you're interested, all you have to do is click the Get a Review link at the top of the page. You can sign up there, and I can look at your swing and tell you exactly what you need to do. All right, so DJR says, when I'm taking a pitch shot or chip shot, should I have my wrist completely unhinged like I would at the start of the full swing, or is there no right or wrong way to do that? So unhinged. Well, you're going to have some hinge at address, just a little bit, right? It's not going to be completely like this. You're going to have some hinge at address, and depending on the kind of shot or what you're most comfortable with, you may hinge it a little bit, but there's not going to be a ton of hinge in pitch shots, right? So meaning I don't typically want to get a bunch of hinge in my pitch shots. It's just not necessary. It's a little bit harder to control the low point when you do that. So when we look at the best pitchers of the ball, typically you're going to see a small amount of hinge, and they're going to be taking a little bit of a wider arc, and they're going to be turning their body more through. There's not going to be as, because in a pitch shot, chip shot, we don't need speed, right? So we don't need a ton of hinge. You're going to be better off having kind of minimal hinge and kind of just turning your chest back and through. So that's what I'd be kind of focusing on, is doing with what's more comfortable. If it's very comfortable for you to get a lot of hinge and you can control it, great, more power to you. But most people, it's not. So I'd focus on kind of turning your body more back and through on the chip shots versus creating a lot of creating a lot of distance with the club by hinging so much. So Mark P says, "Hi Q, my question was not answered." I'm guessing you posted that before I answered it. But yeah, we just answered your question, so good to go there. So John S says, "I have alignment sticks and a mini rubber ball already. Gonna get the trail arm in shape now. Thanks." No problem, John. Glad to hear. All right, so we got about 10 minutes left. If we got any more questions, keep them coming. All right. So Jerry B says, I have recently taken to using a reverse overlap grip on my chips in short pitches. It seems to help me the club face and closing down. This makes sense. I mean, sure. I mean, if it helps you, then great. I mean, there's no what I'd recommend doing if you really want to know like why is it helping you so much. Film yourself with because there's really no way for me to know. I don't know how you're responding to a different grip. You could be doing something completely different. Just changing your grip doesn't necessarily do anything. It could be that you're more comfortable with it. It could be that you actually change the way that you swing because you're holding the club differently. Everyone's going to react a little bit differently. So it makes sense that if you do something different, you're getting different results. That definitely makes sense to me, but I don't know why that's happening. I would need to see your swing. So if you're curious about it, then what you can do is film your swing with the old grip, what you were doing before, and film a face on down line and compare it to the new grip and see if you're doing anything differently, and so on and so forth. So DJR says, if I start the full turn with the shoulders, will that take care of my hips turning naturally, or should I concentrate on turning hips too? So I get questions like this all the time where somebody asks me, do I need to do something? Do I need to consciously do something? Am I actively doing it? And do I naturally do this? And really what it comes down to is if turning your shoulders makes you turn your hips naturally, like if you look on video and you're thinking about is turning your shoulders and your hips turn accordingly, then you are doing that naturally. But if you look on video and you're concentrating, your focus is on turning your shoulders, but your hips aren't turning, then you're going to need to think of something else. You're going to need to think of your hips turning in order to get them to turn, right? So that's really the reality of it. There's no way for me to know. Everyone's brain's different, right? So there's no way for me to know if you focusing on turning your shoulders is going to make your hips turn automatically. The only way to really know that is to turn on the video camera and look and see if that is what's happening. If it's not, then you're going to need to think of your hips in order to get them to turn. So JB says, divot board is the best training aid ever. I could have sold a couple dozen of these where I go for practice. Yeah, I think it's a great training tool. So for those of you who aren't familiar, this here is the divot board. I think it's an awesome training aid. Basically, if you're not familiar with what it does, you put your golf ball right here, you hit balls off of it, and then when you hit it, it shows you exactly where you hit the ground. So ideally, you'd want to get the divot to be starting where the yellow dot is, right? And that would help you to hit some good shots. It gives you some really, really good feedback. Because a lot of times when you go hit off of mats, it's you don't really know where you're hitting the ground in relation to the ball, because the club just hits the mat and it just slides on the mat and it can feel like a great shot, but then you go out on the course and all of a sudden you're chunking everything, right? So it's a great one to help you with that. So but anyway, yeah, that's a great training aid. I'll put a link, if those of you who want to learn more about it, I'll put a link. We have a video that we did on it where Clay kind of reviewed it. I'll put a link to that in the description and you can check it out, or not in the description, in the chat. So let's keep going here. So Mike Walton says, hi Q, weird question, but we'll ask it anyway. Have bad right knee, right-handed golfer, struggle with pulls and pull hooks. Suspect that I'm over the top. and it is because my right knee doesn't want to take the coil in tension. So I come out of it. Question is, does there need to be right knee tension to make a good into or swing? I think it means into out swing. Not necessarily. So what you can do is actually turn your foot out, so that way you can turn your hip back without putting a lot of torque on your knee, right? So that's what I'd recommend doing, is just turning, because let's say, imagine you set up pigeon toed, right? So if I set up pigeon toed, I can't really rotate my hips. It's going to be hard for me. Now I can still swing into out from here, but if I'm here and then I try to rotate my body, I'm going to come over the top, right? I'm basically, if I'm here, I'm just going to be all arms, right? Now I can still swing from the inside. I'm just going to be all arms. So what you can do is flare those feet out, so that way you can still turn your hip back without without putting that torque on your knee. And now I can rotate through the ball and still swing from the inside. That's what I would recommend doing. So Michael M says, I noticed at the Open how inside or how wide the backswing was hitting. I noticed at the Open how wide the backswing was hitting out of the rough up close on the green. The ball would go a short distance to the club. The rough was really heavy. It worked for the pros. I noticed at the Open how wide the backswing was hitting out of the rough. So yeah, that makes sense. I mean, most tour players are going to have a wide backswing, even if they're hitting out of the rough. They're not going to go like this. They're going to go wide, and then they're going to come down steep. So yeah, they're still going to come out wide in the backswing. It's just that typically they'll come down steeper in the downswing when out of the rough. So last question here. Dan S says, missed my question right before the divot board. Oh, sorry about that, Dan. Didn't mean to. So Dan S says, getting a good draw on my shots, but many are a little thin. Still fly as far. What could I still fly as far as what I call a good fuller shot, but was wonder what may help with thinner shots. Probably weight transfer. Yes, exactly. Weight transfer would be probably the big one. When you're hitting thin shots, it's either because you're not getting down to the golf ball. So if that's the case, you can just try hitting the ball higher on the face, right? You're hitting it on the lower part of the face. If you try to hit it higher on the face, that would be what I would first try to do. Now, if you try to hit it higher in the face and you start chunking it, then it's because you're not getting your body forward enough and your club's bottoming out at the ball. So in order to take a divot, we have to have the bottom of the swing arc to occur in front of the golf ball on the target side of the ball. That will make it to where you get a downward angle of attack on the ball. If you're hitting it thin, it means that your angle of attack is like pretty close to zero. You're coming in very level. And if you did take a divot, you would have to take a divot behind the ball and chunk it, or you thin it, right? So if you try to hit the ball higher on the face and you actually chunk it, then that means that you need to get the low point of your swing more in front of the ball. So transferring your weight more to your lead side, making sure that you're not sliding weight off the ball, making it difficult to get to the lead side. Like I said, this is just, when you start the backswing, you can have a little bit of a move off the ball, but you better get back to center very quickly. And then about here in the backswing, this is as far to your right side as you're going to be. And then you're actually going to start moving your lead side forward. So doing some of the step drill will be good. Doing drills from that stop chunking and topping course. I know you're not chunking and topping, you're hitting it thin, but those are all very closely related issues. They're all an issue of the low point occurring at or before the golf ball. So check out that stop chunking and topping course. It's a great course to get you loading up properly and then getting to your lead side better. So check that out. You can find it on the homepage by clicking the house icon at the top. Scroll down the homepage, you'll see a list of all the courses there and select the course. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you all next time.